Okay, so uh the Mishnah says on the second Mishnah on 110b1 at the bottom there. Hakol Ma'alon Eretz Yisrael. Everyone can force anyone else in the family to move to Eretz Yisrael, but not everyone is able to force the family to leave Eretz Yisrael. Hakol Ma'alon Yerushalayim. Anyone in the family, meaning the husband or the wife, can force you to move from outside Yerushalayim to Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim does have more kedusha than the rest of Eretz Yisrael, because you could eat bikurim and some korbanos in Yerushalayim. Now, in the time of, I guess it was Ezra, they made the whole Yerushalayim, the Yerushalayim at that time, into Harabayas. So they extended Harabayas, so the whole Yerushalayim has extra kedusha because of that. Most of what we call Yerushalayim is not that Yerushalayim from the time of Ezra. Be'ena kol motziin, not everyone can force the other members of the family to leave Eretz Yisrael. Echad anashim v'echad anashim. And this is talking about men and women, meaning if the wife wants to move to Yerushalayim and the husband doesn't, she could force, and if the husband doesn't want, um, he has to divorce her and pay her Kesuva. And conversely, if he wants to move to Eretz Yisrael or within Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael to Yerushalayim, and she refuses, she loses her Kesuva. Nasa Isha Beretz Yisrael. So why is this Mishnah here? So because the previous Mishnah was saying you may not want to leave a big city to move to a smaller city, or move from a smaller city to a big city. We're saying, but an exception is Eretz Yisrael. We'll talk about why in a couple minutes. The second case in the Mishnah, Nasa Isha Beretz Yisrael, if he married a wife in Eretz Yisrael, V'gersha Beretz Yisrael, and he divorced her in Eretz Yisrael, Notzin Lami Mos Eretz Yisrael. He gives her money from the coins of Eretz Yisrael. Nasa Isha Beretz Yisrael, if he married her in Eretz Yisrael, V'gersha Kapotkia, and he divorced her in Kapotkia, it's probably somewhere in Turkey. Notzin Lami Mos Eretz Yisrael. He pays her from the monies of Eretz Yisrael. Nasa Isha Kapotkia, V'gersha Beretz Yisrael, Notzin Lami Mos Eretz Yisrael. And if he married her outside of Eretz Yisrael and he divorced her in Eretz Yisrael, for the Kesuva, he pays from Eretz Yisrael coins. So, this halacha isn't necessarily because Eretz Yisrael is better. But the Gemara is going to say that the Tanakama here, the first opinion here, holds that Kesuva is Derabanan. And because it's Derabanan, there's some kulos, there's some leniencies, and the currency of Eretz Yisrael was worth less than the currency of Kapotkia. So even if he got married so I guess if he would go in Eretz Yisrael, excuse me, if they got married in Kapotkia and he wrote in the Kesuva how X amount of coins or silver, then it would be, and then they got divorced in Eretz Yisrael, he could give her Eretz Yisrael coins, even though it's worth less. But I guess if you would put in the Kesuva, which probably wasn't the practice in those days, but if you would put money of Kapotkia, then I don't see why he wouldn't be on the hook for the Kapotkia money. If you specifically spelled out which currency you were going to use, that's written in the star. So, but I guess the machlokas is if it's written plain. And even though you could read on the Kesuva that where they got married, because that's part of the Kesuva, if they either moved to Eretz Yisrael after that, or they got married in Eretz Yisrael and moved away, he could still pay her in Eretz Yisrael money. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Nosin Lamimos Kapotkia. No, he pays her from the money, the coins of Kapotkia, and as Rashi says, they're worth more than the Eretz Yisrael coins. Nasa isha bekapotkia v'girsha bekapotkia, nosin lamimos kapotkia. But if he married her in that place and divorced her in that place, he has to give her the money of that place. Okay, so let's look at footnote number 15. Start on the previous page on 10b1. Okay, look at the last paragraph there. According to some Rishonim, there's a biblical mitzvah to settle Eretz Yisrael. See, for example, the Rabbanan in his appendix to Sefer Mitzvos. Accordingly, our Mishnah's ruling that a person may force his household members to go there is a reflection of this mitzvah. Other Rishonim maintain there's no positive commandment to settle Eretz Yisrael. However, even these authorities agree it is a worthy cause to live in Eretz Yisrael. Thus, the sages enacted that a person should be able to force his family to move there in fulfillment of this aim. In regard to the general issue of the settlement of Eretz Yisrael, see the following sources. Okay, so Tosfos. The Tosfos that we have over here is important. Tosfos says this halacha that either the husband could force the wife or the wife could force the husband to move to Eretz Yisrael or within Eretz Yisrael to Yerushalayim. Tosfos says it does not apply nowadays because the roads are dangerous. Rabbi Chaim Cohn said that nowadays there's no mitzvah to Eretz Yisrael because there's many mitzvahs that depend on Eretz Yisrael and they have punishments and we don't know how to keep them. And what he doesn't say is ignorance is no excuse for the law, but don't put yourself in a situation where because of your ignorance you're going to violate stuff. And if you eat stuff that truma wasn't taken off properly or meiser wasn't taken off properly, there's a potential heavenly death penalty. So it's a bad thing. So Tosos here said two things. The first Tosos says because the roads are too dangerous, we don't force. According to that opinion, it sounds like really you should live in Eretz Yisrael, but there's this thing that's holding us back. What? Is that good? Okay. And Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn says that it's better not to live in Eretz Yisrael. So according to that it's better not to live in Eretz Yisrael because we're not so expert in the halachos and will do things wrong. Now there's a different version of what Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn says. What? So you go to Safta's house. Want me to take you to Safta's house or home? Which one? Okay, right now? Want me to take you right now? Yeah. Only this one, not anymore. There's a different version of Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn. So the Mordechai says, the Mordechai was a later posek in Ashkenaz. Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn wrote in a tshuva that that's talking about in their days that there was peace in the roads, but nowadays that the roads are messed up, you can't force because it's like if you wanted to take her where there's wild animals or bandits. No, he's saying the same thing. There's a different version. There's a different version of Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn. Where is it? Okay, I'm not seeing it right now, but there are others. They say the Mordechai brings it down. I'm not finding it right now in the Mordechai. Okay, the next thing it mentions is the Rambam Hilchos Malachim. So the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. Well, the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim, and I don't think this is relevant. You're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz ever, unless the only exclusions are to learn Torah or to marry a woman or to be saved from the Goyim, and then you have to return to the Eretz Yisrael. Similarly, you can go out for business, but to dwell permanently in Chutz La'aretz is asur unless in Eretz Yisrael there's a big famine that a dinar worth of chitin, the price of wheat has doubled. When is this true? When you have money and the produce is expensive. But if the fruit is cheap, but you can't find money, you could go wherever you want, wherever you could find. Even though you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael, it's not a pious thing because Machlon and Kilion were two of the leaders of the generation. That's Megillus Rus, and because of the great Tsaras, they left and they were obligated to they got a decree of destruction to Kadosh Baruch Hu, meaning Hashem killed Machlon and Kilion. Okay, this Rambam, we'll see it later. in the Gemara, but this Rambam that the Art Scroll have some of these sources that the Art Scroll quotes does not mention Eretz Yisrael. I'm not quite sure. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. I don't know why they're quoting. Okay, the Mordechai quotes Rabbeinu Chaim Cohn. Oh wait, okay, the Ritva is not relevant. The Ritva says that the Gemara there is talking about in the Rambam that they didn't quote the Rambam that matches this thing, but there's a prohibition to go back to Mitzrayim. There's a lot of machloksim, uh, if it's also only from Eretz Yisrael or this or that. The Ritva says in Yom over there that nowadays that we're in Galus, there's not a problem to live in Mitzrayim just like you live in any other place in Galus. So that does not talk about Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Okay, the Tashbetz, I didn't see the response, but in Zohar Rakia, the Tashbetz basically quotes the Ramban. The Ramban should have been the first, so well, they already quoted it. So let's go back to the Ramban for a second. That so so we read this Mishnah, but we're talking about the Mekorot of Mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So the Ramban in last week's parasha, the pasuk says Varashma Eretz V'Shavtem Ba. So Varashta might mean drive out whoever's ever in the land and live there, or make it a Yerusha. The Ramban says that it means it's a mitzvah, we have to live there. And from other psukim, also, so the Ramban says there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rambam does not count it in his Sefer Mitzvos. The Ramban in his Sefer Mitzvos does count living in Eretz Yisrael as one of the 613 mitzvos. So Rav Aaron said that the Rambam doesn't disagree on that, but the Rambam doesn't count it because he holds that it's not an obligation in all times to live in Eretz Yisrael. But if you do live in Eretz Yisrael at any time, even when there's no Beis Hamikdash, you have a fulfillment of a mitzvah. So it's a mitzvah kiyumis. If you do it, you have a fulfillment, but there's no obligation. Now, a little bit different. There's no obligation to wear tzitzis if you're not wearing a four-cornered garment. Well, it's not a good analogy. So if you never wear a four-cornered garment, you never have to wear tzitzis. You never fulfilled the mitzvah, but you never did anything wrong. Nowadays, for a long time already, we dafka wear a four-cornered garment every day, so we will wear tzitzis on it. Okay. So the Tashbetz in the Zorakia basically says a similar idea of the Ramban, and he might quote the Ramban that it's a mitzvah in 613. Oh, so Rav Kook, they say the name Rav Kook, but Rav Tzvi Yehuda, his son, told people it's an Archaim, which it is. It's an Archaim in Parshas Nitzavim, the end of Nitzavim, that basically living in Eretz Yisrael is a prerequisite. You can't. It's more important than a regular mitzvah because there's so many mitzvahs you could only fulfill in Eretz Yisrael. So, of course, it's a given you have to live in Eretz Yisrael, but it's more important than a mitzvah because so many mitzvahs are dependent on living in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Chaim Cohn has a certain similarity. Rabbi Chaim Cohn, who said, "Do you want to go to Saftas now?" Okay. Reb Chaim Cohn, you missed that, but he says because either the roads are too dangerous. No, the first opinion, the roads are too dangerous nowadays, so we don't go. Now that doesn't seem to apply nowadays, right? You could have made an argument in the 70s with hijackings. That's the type of list them dangerous roads they were talking about. But I mean, Rav Hutner, who was obviously a close talmid of Rav Kook, he didn't mind traveling back and forth, and he unfortunately did get hijacked. But Baruch Hashem, he was released eventually. Uh, and then the Rabbi Chaim Cohn says that because there's so many laws that we're not expert with, it's dangerous to go to Israel because if you eat something you didn't take truma or meiser off right, you're chayiv mita b'dei shemayim because it's belongs to the Kohen. We're not allowed. If we're not a Kohen, we can't eat it. Now, Baruch Hashem, in our days, there's many, many more books and knowledge about this. It happens to be historically, Israel was not learned. That's why there's no Talmud Bavli. But now in the last, in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank was the big posek until he died, and then after he died, people started to accept using the psakim of the Chazon Ish when moved. But whatever it is, there's many there's much Torah learning and knowledge about how to do the mitzvos atzliyas baretz, Shemitah, and Trumas and Maasros and all those things, and Peah, Demai, Orla, all those things. Yeah. I mean, we spent almost 2 years learning Shemitah. We're not experts in Shemitah, but we learned a lot of the concepts and some of the stuff, which is very important. And I'm very proud that we did that. And even in the Masechtos, just this is a historical thing, not really relevant. The two yeshivas in Bavel, they didn't learn all the Masechtas in Shas. There are certain things that were outside the curriculum, so to speak. Kachem may have been one, Nadarim may have been one, I forget exactly. In Reb Moshe's cousin, collected essays over there, Chaim Soloveitchik, he talks about some of he has been there in different places. He has, oh, this is the wrong one. Okay, we're not going to go through all these opinions in here.
Okay.
Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. Okay, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 248-4 with Magen Avram. So that's is an interesting halacha. So right now we're reading through a footnote. I don't know, in the English one it's footnote 15, but I don't know in the Hebrew. It's the first footnote on the Mishnah, probably about Mikorot of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So the Shulchan Aruch, there is a very interesting halacha. You're not allowed to go on a caravan or on a ship within 3 days before Shabbos, because if it's a ship, there's a bunch of opinions. Maybe you'll be seasick on Shabbos or different opinions. If you're going to Eretz Yisrael, says the Shulchan Aruch, you could leave even on Erev Shabbos. Because so the implication is because it's a mitzvah to go to Eretz Yisrael, even in our days, you could leave even then. The Chavos Yair that they quote, I did not see anything related to this. In that, Rav Yaakov Emden, it's been many years since I saw that. It's been more than 20 years, and I don't think I have access to that right now. The Orach Chaim I mentioned, that's Rav Kook holds that because Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is so basic, you can't fulfill so many mitzvahs without it. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael isn't counted as a mitzvah because it's a super mitzvah. So many other, it's like an axiom, like in geometry. From the axioms, we have some rules, and then the proofs come from that. So because there's so many mitzvahs dependent on Eretz Yisrael is so important. The Chasam Sofer and these other things. So some of these sources talk about, well, a source that they don't mention, but one of these mentions it also. I think one of the things the Chasam Sofer says is if moving to Eretz Yisrael would lead to reduced observance of Torah mitzvahs, then you shouldn't go to Eretz Yisrael. Some sources that they don't quote the Avnei Nezer in the name of his father, and the Pischei Tshuva in Even Ezra in this halacha. I think it's Siman Ayin Hey or Pei Hey. So they say that if you go to Eretz Yisrael, but you're gonna, here's what the Avnei Nezer says. The Avnei Nezer says that if you go to Eretz Yisrael, you're going to be supported with money from outside of Eretz Yisrael. You don't have a complete fulfillment of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So part of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is that you could have a parnasa in Eretz Yisrael also. The Avnei Nezer says from his father that if you live in Eretz Yisrael but you get supported from people from outside Eretz Yisrael, you do not have a complete fulfillment of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. And the Pischei Tshuva in Even Ezra Simon, I think Ayin Hey or Pei says a very similar thing. So those are some of the general sources. According to the Rabban, it's one of the 613. It applies now. According to some opinions, it's not the 613. There seems to be a middle opinion that it may not be, that it's not one of the 613, but it's more important than a mitzvah. Or the way Rav Aron explained the Rambam is a little bit less, that there's no obligation to, but if you go, you fulfill a mitzvah of being in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so those are that's very briefly some sources about the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Let me just check if I forgot anything. What?
So we'll learn that to leave Eretz Yisrael, you have to have at least
two reasons. Marriage.
We're going to learn right the
But also didn't mention it.
yeah, if there's a famine and the price of food is too expensive.
Now we're saying that to live in Eretz Yisrael, you have to have parnasa there. So it's contradiction.
Right. So if there's a famine, you're allowed to leave temporarily till the famine is over. That's what we saw in the Rambam.
All right, what's the two reason to?
If you need to learn Torah and there's a better Rebbe outside of Eretz Yisrael, and I might say that there might be a better Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, but for you, Chanoch Lenar Al Pi Darko, if if it's going to be better for you to learn from a certain Rebbe who's not available in Eretz Yisrael, to get married.
If you go without those two reasons, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I don't know if you. So here's the thing: there's certainly not a losa say to leave Eretz Yisrael, except maybe the avera to go back to Mitzrayim. But if the Rambam says it's usher to leave, well, sometimes it's a usher without being a halacha. According to some opinions, you would be throwing away the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael to leave. So because you have a mitzvah to be there, you're ignoring the mitzvah and violating the terms of the mitzvah by leaving. According to the Rambam, it's not so clear that that's true. Even according to the Rambam, who doesn't count it as a mitzvah, says you're not allowed to leave.
You know, they said the Rabbi
Yeah,
didn't go to Israel
because he didn't want to leave.
he didn't want to leave.
Right. Rav Yashaber went once in 1935, right before Rav Kook died, but he ended up coming back and never went again. But they offered him he was one of the three candidates to become chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, which was the main position then there. So Rav Kook told, I don't know if it was Rav Tzvi Yehuda or someone else, he said, I hear his grandfather, because Rav Kook was a Talmud of the Netziv in Volozhin, but the Netziv and Rav Chaim were co-rosh yeshivas. The way the share worked, they gave share every other day. So wherever the one left off, the next one gave the share the next day. And so even though Rav Kook was a close time with the Netziv, he obviously heard a lot of Shem Rav Chaim. He told either his son or someone else. He said his grandfather is speaking from his throat, meaning his shiurim were like Rav Chaim's. So he said, go to hear everything you could hear from him. So there was someone, I don't remember if it was Tzvi Yehuda, his son, or someone else, who followed Rav Yashaber throughout Eretz Yisrael. Later on, I think it was Mr. Gross who gave.
So it's not so clear that you're making a big mistake if you do it.
Well, the Lubavitcher Rebbe didn't. They say that he didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael because he wasn't going to stay there permanently. Rav Yashaber was possibly. The Rambam says there's no mitzvah to live there, but he also says if you're there, you can't leave.
Oh, you can't.
You can't. The Rambam himself tried to go there, and he didn't make it. And then he became rabbi and doctor, more of a doctor in Egypt.
So bottom line, if you did it, then what?
I don't know. I mean,
It's not very clear to either one or it is clear.
it's better not to. Whether we force you to go back, it seems what we see all around us every day is that we don't force anyone to move back to Eretz Yisrael.
Someplace that there is such thing called the Solar Fatikun, you know? But you're really going to.
So for some people, you could ask them a kubal, is it proper to stay in Chutz Eretz or should you go back?
But you definitely, maybe, you go because you've been, you know.
You have to go to Eretz Yisrael or leave Eretz Yisrael for Tikkun. I mean, so there's the concept of galut. I mean, it's related, but not exactly the same of what you're talking about. But if someone is in Eretz Yisrael and they have to do galut for a kapara, they could stay within Eretz Yisrael. But no. So no. So from in regard to Tisha B'av, hopefully Mashiach will come. We don't have Tisha B'av, but from those of Eretz, we have galus outside of Eretz Yisrael. We were driven out, and it's a punishment. There's a personal concept of galus. If certain times, if you did something wrong, part of your personal tshuva process could be going into galut. But to go into galut means you leave where you're from. So let's say if you're from Yerushalayim and you go to Tiberia, that's a form of galut. It is. No. But if you're But if these prohibitions of leaving Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't say for personal kapara. For tshuva, you're allowed to leave. That's not what it says to learn Torah, to marry a woman, or if there's a famine. So if you want to do a personal galut, you could still do galut within Eretz Yisrael. Because if you leave where you're from, that's a form of galut.
Just thinking that they look this
Yeah,
personal level,
yeah.
they were but the national, everybody they going to wars and all that, that's not the root.
When someone attacks us and we have to fight to keep our land, that's it's a bad thing that we're attacked. But the fact that you're fighting, you're trying to strengthen Eretz Yisrael and to make it more habitable for everyone. You're right. Okay. I mean, in the time of David HaMelech, there were enemies. Was that galut? Okay.
He didn't go for 6,000 years.
But David HaMelech,
What about?
they were in Eretz Yisrael, but enemies were coming, so he fought them.
Why they came?
Right.
Who sent the enemy?
Hashem.
Thank you. Because we're doing the wrong thing. That's now.
Okay.
So that's the Lord.
So
Unless you enjoy it.
No.
so state of Israel now, it's not particularly Eretz Yisrael.
Absolutely. That's what I think, but this is an opinion of another scholars. I drive it from, conclusion from learning whatever.
Okay.
Galut is basically when you go learning the life for your topics. It's simple. You have all of its all.
Okay. There's
Transfer, you go to the page.
also a very interesting Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Pei, near the end of the seventh parak. If you had an opportunity to buy a piece of land in Eretz Yisrael from a goy, you could have a different goy write the shtar on Shabbos. Even though you're not allowed to tell a goy to do a malach on Shabbos, you're allowed to tell him to write the shtar. So you, because of the great mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael, the Chazal did not make, because to tell a goy is not a Dioraisa, it's only Derabanan. They didn't make the gzera in the case of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael.
You think about Mashkan?
About what?
Mashkan?
About the mortgage?
Yeah.
No, so they talk about it. Are you able to give him the money or tell him where the money is? So some people don't want to do that. I'm not sure, but that's also a Derabanan only. I would think, but
Sorry.
yeah. So that's part of the milchama, the Yisurim,
Why we get milchama?
because we're not doing something right, and Hashem is sending us a message. We have to do some type of. You right. That's it.
Listen. Bishtul Torah send the hammer.
So there's a Gemara in Megillah, Daf Gimel. We read kind of Yoshua. One day a Malach came. The Malach, he said, "Why are you coming? Because we didn't capture Yericho yet, or because we didn't learn Torah last night?" Or no. I'm mixing up two things. That was because we didn't bring the korban yesterday, or because of Bittul Torah. He said because of Bittul Torah. But a different thing, they talk about how great on this Gemara in Bava Kama. Some point out the war with Yericho. When did they capture Yericho? On Shabbos. So we see how important that was. Oh, someone mentioned something interesting. Someone included it because the Rambam, there's a machlokus between the Rambam and the Ramban. I think the Ramban holds that there's a mitzvah, the mitzvah that the Levium carry the Aaron is counted in the Ramban as a mitzvah. The Rambam doesn't. So according to the Rambam, because that was only the time of the Mishkan. Once you had a base of Mikdash, we didn't need to carry it anymore. So the Rambam only counts permanent mitzvos, not mitzvos that only apply for a certain time period. So it may have been the Avnei Nezer, but it may not have been. I didn't see it inside. He said, according to the Rambam, they equated Yishuv Eretz Yisrael with the Mishkan, carrying the which that would actually work better according to the Ramban's opinion, not the Rambam, because according to the Ramban and Chumash, that the Mishkan was a way to transport the Har Sinai to Eretz Yisrael, So we could see there could be a connection between Eretz Yisrael and the Mishkan. But someone tried to say that in the Rambam. So he says because the Rambam doesn't count that mitzvah, so he doesn't count Yishuv Eretz Yisrael either. It's a little bit of a stretch. There's a lot of other opinions. There's whole books written about this. A more recent work from around the time of the Holocaust is Ema Banim Smecha. What?
Yes, you bet. He said, don't we have to be in Israel to do what it takes? He said, Mach do Israel.
Okay.
That was the big sentence.
Okay, so the Gemara 110b2 at the bottom. Hakomal and Lisuyamai. Everyone, you could force everyone in your house to go to Israel. The only person I know who's ever succeeded in this is Rabbi Avishai David. He mentioned it here one of the times he was scholar in residence. No one in his family wanted to move to Israel, but he said we're moving to Israel, and he succeeded. They all moved to Israel. Lisuya avadim, that includes an Eved. So Rashi says if you have an Eved Ivri in your household, and the Eved Ivri doesn't want to go with, you could force the Eved Ivri also. Meaning, obviously, you could force your members of your family. So why does the Mishnah give this open-ended hakol to include an Eved Ivri? And I thought Tosos. No, it's not in this Tosos. Someone mentions normally when we say the word Eved, it means an Eved Kanani, a Goyish Eved, not a Jewish Eved. Because an Eved Ivri, even though he's an Eved, but he's still chayv in all the mitzvahs. So normally, if you would say Eved, it doesn't mean an Eved Ivri. But Rashi says we're talking about an Eved Ivri. But there seem to be some Tanaim who said, and we turn to the next thing, that the Mishnah did say Eved already, Hakol, including Eved. What is Hakol coming to add that Eved that's not already included in Eved? Lisuye minav hayaf lenav hara. So what we saw in the previous Mishnah last week, that just like you can't, we said about not moving your wife from one city to a bigger city or a smaller city, from a nicer house to a worse house to a nicer house. So he said even according to some opinions, from a worse house to a nice house is bad because when your routine changes, it takes physical toll on the body. So even if you want to, so even if you're moving to a worse place, still hakol malin, you can force them to go. Ve'ein hakol motziin. But the second clause in the Mishnah says, not everyone, you can't force everyone to leave Lisuye. What's that included? Lisuye evet shebarach mechutz la'aretz. That includes a slave who's this is not an Evet, this is a non-Jewish slave. He's half Jewish, an Evet Kanani who ran away from chutz la'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. He ran away from his master to Eretz Yisrael. So we're not allowed to force him to go back to his master, Damrin Alei, because we tell the master, Zabne Hachavazil, just sell him here in Eretz Yisrael and forget about him. Go back. Mishum Yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, because of the element of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Now, an Eved is only chayv mitzvos like a woman. But a woman is Yishuv Eretz Yisrael a time-bound mitzvah? No. All the time you live in Eretz Yisrael. So it seems that a woman is chayeves. And an Eved Kanani would also be chayiv to live in Eretz Yisrael because it's not a time-bound mitzvah. I don't know if they say the name of the Grav. There's two mitzvahs you fulfill with your entire body. Tefillah in the mikvah and Yishuv Eretz Yisrael.
What about Sukkah?
Oh yeah, Sukkah too.
Yeah.
You're right. Hakomal and Litra'ayim. So then the second clause in the Mishnah, you could force everyone in your family to move up to Yerushalayim L'Suyim. What does that include? L'Suyim Minav Hayaf L'Nav L'Ra. That includes if you're going from a nice house outside of Eretz Yisrael to a not as nice house in Eretz Yisrael. But you can't force everyone to leave Yerushalayim. What is that including? L'Suya Filu Minav L'Ra L'Nav Yafa. even though you're going to a nicer house. Yeah.
The Gemara מעיין בהוראה שבה של המשנה. הכל מים לירושלים, that's a Mishnah?
Yeah, our Mishnah. Here, look inward.
Okay, so הכל מים לירושלים is a Mishnah, and the Gemara is explaining.
Yeah. So Hakol is a very general. So Hakol must mean someone specific. What specific thing do they mean by Hakol? So it says even if someone wants to move from a nicer house in Tel Aviv to a not such nice house in Yerushalayim, you could force your members of your family, even though it's not as nice of a house, it's Yerushalayim, we have to go. And because the first part of the Mishnah, you could force everyone to move to Eretz Yisrael. You cannot force everyone to leave Eretz Yisrael. The second clause, where it's going to Yerushalayim and from Yerushalayim, we really didn't need the second clause, ve'ein hakol motziin mi Yerushalayim, but because of the symmetry, we kept it in the second clause, even though it wasn't needed. So again, because the Mishnah was transmitted orally for a long time, they want to write it in a style it's easier to memorize. So sometimes, because the first thing had to include a certain thing, the second clause includes all the same elements, even though you don't need all of them. But it's easier to remember that way. That's what I think Shad is when the Gemara says something like this. Okay, Derabanan, the second very wide line. Okay, it's 110b3, the top of the second column. Derabanan, we learned in Dioraisa. Who Omer Lalos, if he wants to go up to Eretz Yisrael or to Yerushalayim, V'hi Omer Shalalos, and she doesn't want. Kofen Osalalos, we force the wife to go up. V'im Lav, and if she refuses, Teitze B'lo Kesuva. He divorces her and she does not get her Kesuva. The Kesuva money. He Omer Lalos, who Omer Shalalos. The wife says, I want to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he says, I don't want to go. Kofen Osalalos, we force him to go. V'im Lav Yotiv Kesuva. And if not, he has to divorce her and he has to pay her Kesuva because she's not doing anything wrong. He's the one doing something wrong. If she wants to leave Eretz Yisrael or Yerushalayim, and he doesn't want to leave, we force her to stay. We force her not to leave. But if she refuses to listen, she's going to go anyway. Takes it Kesuva. He could divorce her, and she doesn't get her Kesuva money. If he wants to leave Eretz Yisrael or to leave Yerushalayim, and she doesn't want to leave where they are, we force him not to leave. But if we're unsuccessful and he's going to leave anyway, he has to divorce her, and he does have to pay the Kesuva because she didn't do anything wrong. So she doesn't lose her Kesuva for that. Okay, Nasa Isha. So the first half of the Mishnah were two cases about moving to Eretz Yisrael and moving to Yerushalayim. The second half of the Mishnah is talking about a completely different thing. Well, it's talking about if you got married in one place and divorced in another place, which money do you pay? Do you have to pay the money of the place you were married at, the money of the place you divorced, or does it always Eretz Yisrael? So, Hagufa Kasha, the Mishnah stuff is a contradiction. Katani Nasa Isha Eretz Yisrael V'Gersha B'Kapotki Nasa L'Mimaz Eretz Yisrael. If you married her in Eretz Yisrael and you divorced her in Turkey, you give her Eretz Yisrael coins. Alma Basar Shibud Azlinan. So that implies that it goes after the source of your obligation. Because you got married in Eretz Yisrael, when you wrote the document, you were in Eretz Yisrael, so you'd have all the coins that you had were Eretz Yisrael coins. So it would seem like when you accepted this obligation upon yourself, because it was in Eretz Yisrael, you have to pay money of Eretz Yisrael. Ema Seifa, but this next clause, Seifa is from the word Sof, Danny, but the Mishnah doesn't literally mean beginning and the end. It could be this clause and then the next clause says Nasa Isha B'Kaputki V'Gersha B'Eretz Yisrael Nosa L'Mimos Eretz Yisrael Alma Basar Guvayna Azlina. If he married her in Turkey and he got divorced in Eretz Yisrael, he gives her Eretz Yisrael money. So that implies that we follow where you are now to collect. So the Gemara doesn't like. It feels that the Mishnah is a contradiction. Does it follow where we became obligated in this debt, or does it become when you are obligated to pay it where you are? So Rabbi answers, Mikule Kesuva Shanukan. This is one of the leniencies of Kesuva that is being taught here in this Mishnah. Ksavar Kesuva Derabanan, because the Tana holds, which seems to be the opinion of most of the majority is that Kesuva is only Derabanan. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer nosing lemimos kaputkia Kesuva Kesuva Dioraisa. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says he has to give her from Kapotkia money that is from this place in Turkey because he holds Kesuva's Dioraisa. So it seems that the obligation here is because, as Rashi says, um, so Rashi says you follow where the debt was incurred, like all obligations. That's what Rashi says here. You could have explained something else. There in the Gemara in Kedushin, it's around Daf Yud Aleph Yud Beis, I think, talking about a shekel or a dinar, or Malchokos Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. They discuss. The Gemara there says that if it's a Dioraisa obligation, you have to use the heavier coin that has more silver in it. If it's only a Derabanan, you use the less massive coin, the coin that has less silver in it. Now, I don't know, maybe this is not relevant to Kesuva because even if Kesuva is Dioraisa, it's not explicitly said in the Torah. In Parshas Mishpatim, when we say Mohar Habasulos, that seems to be, well, either Mohar Habasulos, which, by the way, the Torah Tamima, in an essay called Safal and Amanim, points out that there are some Aramaic words in the Torah, and one of them is Galeid, we know from Lavan, and Mohar Habasulos. Excuse me, Galeid is Hebrew, but Yagar Sadusa is the Aramaic, and Mohar Habasulos, that Mohar is a, but also by the Shifcha Kananis, we talk about She'era Ksusa Va'onasa Lo Yigra. So some say that we see the concept of Kesuva from the fact that that if he ends up marrying a Shifcha Kananis, excuse me, a Jewish Shifcha, an Amma Ivriya, and that's a second wife, or he takes a second wife, and here he can't reduce her clothing and food and shelter and his and the marital relations with his wife. So we see that a husband does have obligation to pay those things, or to provide those things. So some say that the ksuva is a more formalized thing, but it's based on that, and the Tanakama, which seems to be the opinion of most Rishonim, holds that it's not, that it might be related, but the ksuva is a separate thing than that. Now, I think we talked about it way back on Daf Yud Beis or Yud Gimel. I thought there was a discussion way back in the beginning, in the first parak, around Daf Yud Beis about this. I'm not seeing it right now. By Rabbi, I think there's a Tosos that Paskins like just Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. But the main sugya is here, not there. Oh, it's on Daf Yud. Idmar, Amr of Nachman, Amr Shmuel. So this we don't have in your Gemara. This is way back on Daf Yud. Rav Nachman said the name of Shmuel, the name of Shimon Elazar. Chachamim made a decree for Benos Yisrael that a Basula gets 200 and a widow gets 100. So Tosfos mentions from here that the fact Chachamim Tiknu implies that Kesuva is Derabanan. And also in Gemara Yevamos on Daf Peitas Amud Aleph, even if she doesn't have a Kesuva, she has a default rabbinic Kesuva, so it won't be easier for her husband to divorce her. It seems that the basic understanding of the Shas is that Kesuva is Derabanan. But there's a question. We write in a Kesuva, if she's a Basula, you get this many, 200, 100 that you get in Dioraisa and another 100. So we write Dioraisa in the Kesuva. So Rabbeinu Tam says we rely on Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that we said in the Mishnah in the last parak. That's the Mishnah we're talking about right now. That you give her from the coins of Kapotkia because he holds Kesuva Dioraisa, and we hold it from Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah. And also the Re said we don't pass like Reb Nachman. The Reb Nachman is on Daf Yud. That implies it's only Derabanan because we found Reb Ashi, who's after him. Reb Ashi was the last generation of the Gemara, and in the Gemara we usually follow like the, or up to a certain point we follow the earlier. At this, after a certain point we follow the later. He says on Daf Yud Beis, so it makes it sound like Dioraisa. So I think we mentioned back then, but it's been a while. So this is the main sugya. And there's long we're showing them about how we paskin that what the Tosas I just mentioned is just a short. What I just read was the Tosas is a short thing about it. Do we have a minion yet? So we'll just read to the end of this paragraph 110b4, and we'll leave the rest for tomorrow, for next week. Tanarbana, we learned in the Brayso, if someone takes a day, you owe me money. Here's the loan document. Kasubo Bavel, Magbil Mimos Bavel. If it says Bavel in it, that was the place of the debt, you pay him from Bavel money. Kasubo Eretz Yisrael, Magbil Mimos Eretz Yisrael. If it says Eretz Yisrael, he collects from Eretz Yisrael coins. Kasubo Stam, if it doesn't say where it's from, it just says you owe me 100 coins or 100 silver. Hotziu bevavel magbil mimos bavel. If he's takes out the star, he's trying to collect it in Bavel, he pays Bavel money. Hotziu be'eretz Yisrael magbil mimos Eretz Yisrael. If he took it out in Eretz Yisrael, he pays with Eretz Yisrael money. So it implies that Besser collection. We follow where you're trying to collect it, and that was one of the questions we asked about. And Rashi says that seems to be a Dioraisa thing, that where you collect it. Okay, so we'll leave it here. And we'll continue next week.